I've started noticing something strange about how I think when I make art. It feels more and more like my ideas don't really come from inspiration anymore, but instead they come from absence. The thing is, I've had an uncomfortable realization. Every time I have a moment to think, I reach for my phone before the thought can fully form. So what's going on? The problem is, we don't really choose what we consume anymore, at least not in the way we used to. Once upon a time, for example, back in the 90s when I was a kid, I knew The Simpsons would be on at 6. And after that, I'd draw, maybe do some homework. And of course, I was a kid, but how I spent my time was more defined. The evening had structure to it. But now, on an evening, tired after a day of work, feeling slightly bored, I absentmindedly find myself reaching for my phone and I scroll. What used to be a half-hour episode of The Simpsons is now an endless stream of completely unrelated emotional shifts. The fruit machine of the algorithm gives us cute cats, amazing drone footage, news stories, disasters, sometimes even things that might not be real. One minute it's something beautiful, and the next it's something disturbing. I don't choose what I see anymore. None of us do. The algorithm does. So what does that constant interruption actually do to our brains? And what happens to our creativity when every moment gets filled before a thought can finish? Well, to really understand what phones might be doing to our creativity, it helps to look at how the brain actually works. Because creativity isn't simply trying to be creative. Some of our most important mental work happens when nothing appears to be happening at all. There's this whole system in the brain called the default mode network. This is basically the brain's background processing mode. It becomes active when we're essentially doing nothing at all. For example, daydreaming, having a shower, lying in bed, waiting in a queue, or just feeling bored. When the brain isn't being fed lots of external input, like watching TV, listening to a podcast, scrolling on a feed, it starts to look inward, connecting memories, ideas, and little fragments of thoughts. This is deeply tied to creativity, memory, and imagination. But here's the problem. We almost never get to this state anymore. Not because we're always busy, but because we've filled every moment. Waiting for the bus? Scroll. 5 minutes of silence? Scroll. Slight moment of boredom? Scroll. Even when nothing is happening, something is happening. And over time, this changes how we think entirely. Boredom used to be quite normal. Our default mode network had many opportunities to be active, commuting, waiting, doing repetitive tasks like the washing up, but now that process is interrupted before it even begins. The default mode network is eerily quiet. It's worth saying here, too much time with the default mode network active can lead to rumination and anxiety. The sweet spot is a balance between focusing on a task and time away from it. In fact, this has a name, and you've almost certainly experienced it before. Have you ever been stuck on a problem or an idea, stepped away, and then sometime later, with a bit of space between you and the problem, suddenly the solution becomes apparent? This is called the incubation effect. And this happens when the default mode network lights up and allows the brain to make connections between ideas, which can help us to be creative and solve problems. In order to be creative, imaginative, our brains need periods of low stimulation to allow the default mode network to do its thing, process information, and make new connections. And I really feel this in my creative work. Most of my ideas for drawings usually show up when I'm falling asleep or right when I wake up. Those moments when nothing is really happening at all. And it makes sense, because in those moments, there's finally enough space for ideas to connect with each other without interruption. I think a lot of creatives experience something similar. You know, those aha moments bubbling up when you least expect them? So I've started trying to leverage that. I've started changing parts of my routine because of it, in an effort to give my brain some space. Things like spending more time in the garden, growing plants, and doing things that don't involve a screen or constant input. Even simple things like leaving my phone upstairs out of sight and where it can't interrupt whatever's trying to form in my head. I've really noticed that when I reduce all of that external noise, I get a lot more clarity and ideas flow way more easily. I just don't think we were meant to live with this much constant input because it totally stifles our creativity. And I think that all those little moments of quiet and boredom might matter a lot more than I used to realise. Because without them, our best ideas don't get the chance to form in the first place. Maybe that's what boredom actually is. Not something to avoid, but something to seek out so that creativity has a space to show itself. Maybe boredom is the canvas for our creativity. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, it really helps to support the channel. And if you want to see more from me, subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next one. Let me know in the comments what you think about this, or if you've noticed anything similar in your own thinking. I always read the comments and they may just inspire a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.